Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to be talking about storytelling for animals as in the context of coming from filmmaking, but I'm not only going to talk about it as a filmmaker. We're going to talk about storytelling in general in terms of visual imagery, maybe a bit of social media and all of that. I will be showing, I guess, at least one clip. And I do want to spend a bit of more time around discussion at the end. So, why I think it is important? We need to change culture. I feel like we're at the point where we have all the plant-based protein alternatives available. We have all the vegan nuggets and all the cupcake recipe ready to go, but the culture is not changing. As long as people do not understand where we are culturally, we live, as we know in this room, in a culturally violent world and society where we have normalized and accepted unacceptable things, not just to animals, but also to each other, the state of the world. Everybody is quite desensitized, and we need to be changing culture. And storytelling comes in because as human beings, we have used storytelling since the dawn of times. We've been, telling stories. This is how we have been passing tradition, myth, legend, culture, and how we shape, our worldview and how we relate to each other. And so in the context of animal rights, I think it's one of the key thing. And this is where sometimes it can come in conflict with some of the campaigns, because we have been thinking, if you look at purely things in terms of numbers, we can think, okay, let's focus on what we call food animals, right? We look at factory farms, we look at chickens, we need to talk about the chickens and the fish, and we do. But at the same time, culturally, we are not there yet. And so how do we build and extend the circle of moral compassion? How do we start people to care really about, dogs and pets, some of the industries that should be done with right now, like foie gras, for instance, or fur, animal testing, all of that. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about chickens and fish, but we need to be very, very mindful about how we talk and how we engage with this thing. So I'm going to be sharing my perspective. I'm not saying this is an absolute truth. I'm not also saying that, that this is what you, that there's not one way to do it. Okay, what happened? That's that. Okay, anyway, so changing culture, paramount and important. A little bit about my background. I did not come from a filmmaking background, so long story short, I'm originally from France, hence the accent. I've lived in Asia for almost 20 years. My early career, I was actually a Chinese-French interpreter. I worked in diplomacy and I worked in sales. And I would say that I have learned skills in different sectors that I am using now for advocating for animals. So for example, being in sales in China and selling very boring stuff like just marketing software to Chinese companies have helped me now. I know how to pick up the phone and fundraise and manage a budget or things like that. Basically, and I don't want to talk too much about me because this is not the point, but 11 years ago, I did have a spontaneous awakening. In my years in China, one of my dogs that I adopted was rescued from being eaten, and his fur was going to be used for cheap fur as well. And that kind of planted a seed in me. I started rescuing dogs and cats when I found them. I've always loved animals, actually. My first animal liberation, I was 3 years old. It was my grandma's canary. Someone had gifted a canary to my grandma, and she put it it was in a cage on the balcony. And I have confirmed with my mom that my memories are accurate. I did open that cage. But I do remember very, very vividly this rage against the cage. This is something that I still feel to this day. But of course, life happens, conditioning, culture, all of that, right? And so I forgot about that, but I reconnected with it through my dog, who taught me animal individuality. And then didn't happen overnight, but one day I realized, well, you know, there's so much violence in the world, but I am contributing to it, and I didn't want to be you know, ignorant participant in those things anymore. And so I decided to be vegan. I heard of vegans. I'm like, they exist. I'm going to do that. Let me Google and see how to do it. And then I discovered the horrors. And when I discovered the horrors, I decided, well, just being vegan is not going to be enough. So I quit my career. I was also in a place in my life where I could do that. And I started with lectures, actually. And after a year of giving lectures in universities, corporate environments, and all of that, I think I did a quick count, and I had spoken to, I think I reached something like 5,000 people, which is a very small number when we look at the urgency that we are facing. And so I decided to turn to films. But because at that time, there were, like, for me, two paths. Either I become a YouTube influencer, but I don't have the patience for that. But somehow I have the patience for grueling work of working for many years on one project. So I'm like, okay, let me make a film. And I thought I was just going to be done with one. It's called Let Us Be Heroes. I put it on Plant-Based News. It went really well. I never promoted it, never even spoke about it almost. But then I thought, oh, making films is easy. Let me make films. It's not easy. But I think, like everything else in life, when you are meant to do something, there is a flow to it. Of course, there's effort and there's hard work, but there's a flow. There's like the stars align, some doors open, and it makes you feel fulfilled. And that's what I encourage everyone to potentially follow. So I came from that. And for me, I consider myself more like I work for impact. My bosses are the animals, so I try as much as possible to get the stories out for them and to not be attached as a filmmaker. Sometimes we, you know, not just filmmakers, but we can have a bit of ego and be attached to something and the way it should look like and the way we should come across. But I try my best to really not be like that. And to think constantly of impact, because anybody can make a film, honestly, but how do we really use that as a tool to make a difference for the animals and change culture? So with that in mind, again, I'm talking from filmmaking perspective, but this is true of any content in general. I feel like story should come before facts. One of the aspects of our society, and I think it is also a very patriarchal view, is that we glorify IQ, intellectual, cerebral, data, science, hard numbers, and these are important, but that's not how humans create a connection. That's not how we change. You know, we can talk about, okay, you know, we are killing trillions of fish and billions of, you know, chickens and land animals, but how do we understand? Like the human brain cannot really understand and comprehend billions. We can hardly understand 10,000 or 1,000. What's really important is to connect the scale with the individual, because ultimately it is one individual going through tragedy multiplied by billions of times. And so for me, I think story is always first, and facts are here to back a story. What I have seen a lot of is that people with the best heart, and I do want to acknowledge we have a movement with people who are full of passion. There's a lot of talent, a lot of skills, but sometimes what I've seen when it comes to storytelling, we forget the storytelling and we get into advocacy. And we try to convince people, we try to persuade, and so it becomes an issue-driven conversation. And so what I see is stories, and recently I've seen something that I should not name, but I've seen a film that's supposed to be a story, a fiction film, narrative film, but it's been built based on issues. And so it doesn't work. Because, you know, it's like you have the same 10 objections, you know, against whatever, like eating animals, for instance, and then you try to force a story following these issues, and you end up with some kind of Frankenstein thing that doesn't really work, is not alive, is not dynamic, is not connecting. So for me, number one, the story, and then the facts are here to back the story. It comes in the background. So focusing always in a story on the story is key. And I'm going to comment, actually I should have commented a bit before. This is actually a photo that I took alongside Animal Rising in an egg farm, RSPCA accredited farm in the UK 2 years ago. This is a feedlot in the US, in Colorado, where they put basically the cows and the bulls for like 18 months to get as fat as possible. Yeah, so I will just explain a little bit the background of the images. When we build a story, it's important that we have what we say an arc. And an arc is a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you are familiar with the hero's journey, who knows about the hero's journey in general? So very, very important. And again, this is something you can apply to any kind of content of image, but it's basically the idea that you have a main character or a character like that is starting and then going through tribulations and then coming out of that with some power or growth or learning, like that the journey itself is transformative. And I often say that I don't think if you make a film right, the film should make you. I feel like my films have made me and they are still making me. A story is an arc within an arc within an arc within an arc. So for example, I'm gonna use the example of my film Slay. So Slay was a very ambitious endeavor, and it's an investigative documentary into the fashion industry, investigating fur, leather, and wool, but also looking at environmental impact, human rights impact, and of course, what happens to animals. So it's a lot, it's a huge scope, it's multiple countries. We ended up shooting in 7 countries. And how do you keep people, engaged, entertained? It's a serious topic. Some stories you can use humor to engage with people. This story it's not really funny, so I couldn't use humor, so I had to use intrigue and music and pace. But this shot was taken in India, where we documented the impact on local communities that are affected by the pollution coming from tanneries. And this woman is actually the only breadwinner of a family because her husband, a crop farmer, got crippled because the chemicals have leaked into the waterways and into the soil. And so it was important to show the story because, yes, of course, I can say, look at this community, people have cancer, people are crippled, that many millions of people. But then we are like, okay, let's sit down. And it's very quick, it's just maybe a minute, but we have this story of, this is what's happening to me, this is the waterways, we cannot educate the kids. And this story arc within itself is within the arc of leather in India, and then the bigger leather story. And then the whole part of it is, we're looking at fashion, we're looking at things that are on runway, etc. So it's really important to always have these mini stories within stories, like a little babushka dolls. You say babushka in English? Yeah. So, yeah. Killing your darlings, very painful. Very often when we want to say something, we want to say everything about it, right? And we say, okay, I want to talk about that, but because we know so much, and we know and we care, and we think every single detail is important, and they are important in themselves, but we can't tell a story with saying everything, because if you say everything, in the end you say nothing, you can connect. So there's this process in any creative process that's called killing your darlings. It means you have to be ready to cut out things that are important to you. In Slay, for example, it meant that I couldn't bring in exotic skins, snake skin, reptiles. I just couldn't. Rabbits, I couldn't also, because then you open a new Pandora box, and then you lose people, and then you lose the pace. This is a still from something I had to cut out. I've been working on a project on open rescue for 2.5 years now, and we filmed this amazing open rescue in Canada, in a pig farm. And the footage is beautiful, everything is beautiful, but like along the way, I realized, well, this takes out of the story. It takes us out of the US. Then suddenly they are speaking in French Québécois, which is a whole thing in itself. But I had to take it out. And I'm like, wow, what do I do with this amazing footage? Sometimes you just have to let it die. But sometimes I decided to make a short film. And I hope to release it at some point this year, probably straight to YouTube. I put it on festivals, but it's, festival, it's like super competitive. And of course, we are working on an issue that people do not deem as important yet. So, I think Suko, the artist, said that art depicting animals is considered trivial because animals themselves are considered trivial. And so everything we do in that space is very, very difficult to be recognized. But you have to be ready to cut it out. And sometimes it means like it becomes a project on its own and it has a life of its own that is different. In that case, it worked because there was again, the arc within the arc. There was a full story already of a young activist who is dealing with mental health issues, but also who can't keep herself from going back in, and who moves from being an investigator to doing open rescues as well. So I do hope to release it later this year. Creating an emotional connection, incredibly important. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. Again, I'm talking from about films because this is what I focus on right now, but it can be during an investigation. It can be during anything you do. It can be a clip on social media, and I'm going to show you one. But in Slay, we're talking about, again, this big issue, the wool industry, and we're talking about these lambs that are dying as a collateral damage from the wool industry. But, okay, how do we make a connection? We cross the fence, and there's this one little lamb, middle of the night, that we find that is orphaned, again, as a collateral damage. And this became an emotional point where people connected. And when I work, I try to, of course, have feedback. And we had test screenings, and the first cut of Slay, people were not connecting with wool. And I gathered the feedback, and I had I think more than 60 people, and I could see the wool part was not connecting, so we had to go back and work again and work at building it in a way that we have that emotional connection. And it has become one of the key points in the film where we talk about all these big issues and all of that, but then we realize, okay, this is how individuals are impacted. I want to play a quick clip here. Bear with me for the technical thing. But it's not graphic, but it is upsetting. So if you don't want to see it, don't see it. But basically, it is... I did a little foie gras investigation a few months ago. And I want to show you this clip because, again, it is not graphic. When we think of foie gras, of course, it's force feeding, and the key shot to get was that. But this clip I put on social media, and we are close to 10 million views, 6.4 million views on TikTok, and 3.3 something on Instagram. And it's just basically just showing the story of the field. And this is the force feeding tube that's super long, like this. Actually, the shot, is it the shot? Well, whatever, and then it goes back to them. Sorry, that should have done this way. But you can see how they are terrified. And myself, when I was there, what really, really impacted me was this. It was more powerful than force feeding and all of that, because of course there are some people who say, but they're scared because they're scared of you because you're there with your camera. No, the geese, when they are free range before they get into the force feeding cycle, they are perfectly fine around human. They don't care, they just come to you. But once they get into the force feeding cycle, this is when they get really terrified of humans. And this little clip of 10, 14 seconds is telling a story. It's telling the story of this is really what they go through. You see the machine, there's no words, there's no lecture, there's no and you should not do that. It's just, this is the truth, this is what's happening. And this has been connecting with people tons. I'm not really focusing on, telling people to change their diet, because this, again, I'm thinking more about changing the whole mindset. But I've had tons of people, especially on TikTok, saying that, okay, now they're stopping eating meat and all of that. So it's good, even though, as we know, I don't take things, I don't think that it's measurable in any way, but it's important to say that, again, you don't have to make a film to tell a story, you know, like even a social media clip can be that impactful for that. And I was surprised by it because I'm not a great social media person, to be honest. Talking about animals as individuals, again, going back to this thing, this is a pig that a mother saw that I photographed in Italy. This is a Parma ham supply chain. That's 3 years ago. And it's again like, how do we connect the scale of the horror to one individual and to really put the individual front and center? And I think for me, I mean, I'm not trying to critique my own photos, but I try to always have a critical look at what I do. And of course, pigs have very, very expressive gaze, but you can see, you know, you can see the captivity, you can see the look, you can see the questioning of the viewer. And I think it's always, always important to make sure that we represent animals as individuals in what we do. They have their own, if they could, you know, they have their own agency, they have self-determination, even if they are not able to express it. And to show the lack of body autonomy, like this kind of thing, is things that we need to think about when we shoot and when we tell a story. So that's also from the RSPCA investigation. That was the same barn with 64,000 animals. And so the first shot that you've seen, you can see like basically hands into the dark, into oblivion. And now we are with one individual in there. I think it's really important that we hold ourselves to our highest standards when we work, because we are working on a topic like it's life or death, right? It's a very serious topic. And of course, you can use very different ways for storytelling. You can use humor, you can use horror film, you can use anything to be creative, but it's important that we take it seriously and we hold ourselves to high standards. So for me, for example, I think one thing that is important to have is to develop self-criticism, meaning like you look at your work, is it a good job or not? Is it a good image, is it not? Do you need to train yourself for more skills? Like what can you do better next time? Who can you talk to that you can learn from to, you know, to be ready? Because sometimes you will have very little time, like sometimes not this image, but sometimes I have 90 seconds, and I messed up a lot of shots, of course, but sometimes I have maximum half an hour or 20 minutes to make the shots. And that's important to, again, to be ready to work better and to really be able to look at your work to think, okay, is this a good job or not? Like, is it really giving justice to the animal in the best way we can, or is it not? And so for me, photography, cinematography is really important. We are talking about topics that are really painful. I'm going to talk a bit later about how we deal with graphic imagery. But we have to do our best, because people are not, I'm not going to say like people are not ready to, it's a message that people don't want to hear, you know? So how do we get to people? How do we get their attention? We have to work harder, and it's just a reality. Shooting ratio. Shooting and whatever you do whatever you are photographing or creating or filming, I have a very, very high shooting ratio. So that means you need to overshoot. You need to shoot more. This foie gras investigation, I shot 1,000 photos over, I think, 4 farms, like a few days, and over 200 videos at the same time. And that's how, again, you have to adjust and get the shot. But for example, this shot is telling a story that is different as well. As you can see, out of focus in the first, in the front, like the force feeding, but the story here is the fear in the back. And that shot is connecting with people in a different way. It's telling a story in a different way. I have the same shot where it's the opposite, where you have the back that is out of focus and the focus is on the goose that is going through the force feeding. But shooting more is really, really important, because that's the only way that you will have enough to get your best of best shot. I can't remember how many terabytes we had for Slay, but we shot so much. And you always think that, oh, that's good enough, I have what I need. But no, you always need more, always shoot more. And maybe organize yourself in a way that you're not going to be too overwhelmed. Like sometimes I am overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, I should shoot less. But it's still better to have more than less. I want to talk about, so this is not me. This is from a film called The Northman, but I want to talk about this image. And after this slide, I will ask to cut the video for a second for the next slide, because I'm very protective with my images. But anyways, so this is a reference shot that I had for the current project I am working on. This is Anna Taylor-Joy. It is a film called The Northman, and she's shot, I don't know if you see it well on that, but this is a special lens, not to get geeky about things, but it's a special lens that basically keeps the subject in focus while distorting everything around. So it gives you an eerie feeling of something that is blurring the line between reality and dream or fiction. And for me, when I saw that image, that was the image that I wanted to create for the project that I am working on, and I'm going to explain to you why. Can you cut? Sorry, I just have to be careful about some stuff, and it's not because I don't trust people, it's because when we pitch, this is in active pitching, and when a project is active, like the streamers and all the platforms, they are very, very careful about, okay, is the image already out there? Is it already diluted? Like, you need to retain exclusivity. This is another image from the short film that I mentioned before, The Open Rescue. This is also a reenactment, because obviously we don't take the camera out in the night when it's happening. You know, if you film a direct action, the priority is obviously the life that's being saved. It's not getting the shot. So it's something that I had to deal with, but this is the next day. This is the actual pig that was rescued the day before, and we just reenacted just that part of fleeing away from the location. And I love this because there's a lot of tenderness. It is a group that operates both with people who show their face and don't show their face, so it's beautiful. It's reality, and this little piggy is having her best life somewhere in Canada. Real quick, because apparently I'm speaking too much. Anonymous characters, there's a lot of ways to feature people who do not want to be recognizable. There's a lot of beautiful, smart ways to do that. It doesn't have to be a silhouette against a window. Interviews, very important. Again, you have different ways of staging things. I think diversity in interviews is extremely important. Representation is really, really important. So seeing, when you are scoping for a subject, for me, I always look at, can I feature women more? Because reparations. And also because, I mean, there's a lot of people doing amazing work, but you have to find the best person for the job. And sometimes this best person is not a vegan, it's not your vegan friend. And this is something where you really have to be conscious about that. This person is not vegan, but she is an authority in fashion, so it was important that she was in the film. Plus, I was looking also for a beautiful black woman, so that if I have a black audience, they can have role models that are, you can aspire to be more like them, and who can give you a code of conduct. It cannot be like you only portray. Otherwise, I only had the people who were exploited in Italy in the leather supply chain. And I think these are things that we need to be conscious about. But yeah, it can be outdoor. Bottom right is an interview with Ronnie Lee. I think I'm running out of time, but briefly, we kind of, wanted the gritty look, so we spray painted a bus stop. I was told that it was washable with water, but it was not so easy. So we had a bit of drama, but we made it. And it looks good. As we are telling these stories, we need to define the common enemy. It's really important to get people on our side against an enemy. And the enemy, for me, is industry. It's the system. It's corporations. this image, this is a shot I took in Italy. This is actually a chicken broiler barn, and it kind of represents a little bit of the enemy that we are up against. So an enemy doesn't have to be like, as we know, it's not one bad guy, it's not one person here or there, it's a system. So how do we visually explain that? For me, this shot shows that quite well, because the fans look like two big eyes, but at the same time, it's like an industrial monster that completely like has no humanity and is not organic and is just very much like a machine. So looking at tools, you know, like the tools, the industrialization, like all these things are also informing the story. Very important talk about graphic footage. So we have to be very careful. It's always like a thing to walk a fine line to show what is happening without sanitizing the truth, yet without traumatizing people to the point where they turn off and stop watching. I do feel like there is a place for graphic footage and graphic content, but for what I do that is more mainstream, I have to be very careful. So one way that we did that in Slay is, or that I do that sometimes, is showing it. We have the full screen, but then we're showing it on the screen, and then we cut when it's too painful or when it's too much. Like the leather process, I cannot show it full screen at all. It's unwatchable, and I would just, yeah, I wouldn't have people would just not watch the film at all. And the point is not to traumatize people, because when we are traumatized, then we can be into inaction and paralyzed. So how do we get enough? We always push enough to show the horror without going too far to lose people. So there's a lot of different creative ways you can do that. Sometimes it's also just a reaction and just the sound or black screen, or you cut at the right moment, but it's important to show that. Using AI quickly, for me, there's good application and bad application to everything. Good application of AI, in this case, we're talking about lab-grown stuff, so it's already like synthetic and something that doesn't really exist. I mean, it's kind of existing, but I didn't have, if you want to film, like, I don't know, a material, it's very boring if I put a camera on this, right? So, you know, like a render, like where you have something that is animated, then, you know, that could be one way to do it. Otherwise, I feel as, again, we are talking about animals and truth, it's very, very important that we are careful with AI and how we use it. I'm not fully against it, but we need to be careful, because we need to build trust with people, trust with the public, and so it's really important we use actual shots. I do not like shots, application of AI where we use, for example, investigative footage, and then we make whatever, an animation out of it. Like, personally, I'm really against that. We need to also, as we use AI, we need to always think of the animals and make sure that they are dignified, that we don't strip them away even more, even from that, you know, even when they're gone. Beyond films, like, again, so not everything has to be a film. I'm looking myself at projects that are more for YouTube, more short format, more like, how about shows? How about whatever, investigative show for YouTube? How about a show just for social media? How about a TikTok series where things are really creative? How about photography? Like, not everything has to be a film. Not everything has to be a feature. Not everything has to be, so you have to go with what works as well and do your own thing, like find your own creativity, to not be just do your own thing. Like, at the end of the day, you also should derive some satisfaction and pleasure from what you do, and find the balance between impact but passion, to make sure that it is sustainable and it is something that you can do for a long time. Sorry, one word. This is from a direct action in Italy, following the group 269, and it's the woman before entering a slaughterhouse. And then, back to, I think we can now discuss. So I don't know if it's relevant, but please ask your questions and we can discuss more. Yeah.